Okay, so before I start, for those of you who are new, I'm just going to give a quick introduction to my co-hosts to explain the various noises you may hear in the background throughout this video. So in the front here on the left-hand side is Amira. She's a really loud snorer, so you may hear her snoring on occasion throughout the video. Behind her is Mouse. He is currently 4 months old and he loves his toys. So you may hear crazy toy noises. He's got a rather loud fish toy. He's also got a rather loud mouse toy. And of course, when his best friend, or you could say a cousin, comes for a visit, because he is another Chihuahua who is a week older than Mouse, when he comes for a visit, there's just mayhem, and you may hear pups playing in the background. You may also hear on occasion, when Mouse really wants someone to play with him, he's had enough with his toys, you may hear him barking at one of the other two dogs to try and get them to play. On the right hand side is Taka. She's not quite as present as the other two in my videos. You may occasionally hear a more mellow snoring. Her snoring isn't nearly as loud as Amira's. You may also occasionally hear the sound of claws on hardwood floors because she doesn't know how to walk softly. And there's probably a good chance that you're going to hear her munching away on dog biscuits because she loves her biscuits. The other sound that you may occasionally hear is a minor bird that thinks it's an alarm clock. That's its favourite impression. I know I've heard it do other sounds, but mostly you're just going to hear an alarm clock in the background. It's not my alarm clock. I can't turn it off. It's a bird. So following the release of the phone calls between Stearns and his parents and the release of a number of unredacted interviews, I've been doing a review of some of the other interviews that we have. So having just finished going through the somewhat lengthy video interview that was done with Jen, the Detective O'Malley one, I now want to jump in and revisit the derivative use interview. Now, this interview especially was a cause of a lot of concern for many people at first. And that goes back to, and the reason I'm commenting on this you'll see in a minute, that goes back to a handful of channels who basically, and when you look back now you realise they were fear-mongering. Basically saying, well, this means there's no way Jen will ever get prosecuted. These same channels have also taken the line of the CSAM case against Stearns will probably be thrown out because of the phone evidence being illegal. So there's a bit of a pattern going on here. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we should all be talking about this case logically, without fear-mongering, and with the main focus being Maddie. We want justice for Maddie. So when people basically use fear-mongering to get extra views on their channels, how is that helping Maddie? So in terms of this derivative use, just to clarify, and I think everybody understands now, this does not give Jen some kind of blanket immunity. She can still be prosecuted. And if they can prove that she lied in this interview, then there's no immunity from this interview either. So I'm not giving up hope on the idea of Jen being arrested. There could be multiple reasons why we've not yet seen an arrest. Most logically, it's going to look better in trial if they use her as a witness to not have any charges hanging over her head. It's going to create a better impression with jurors if she is not someone who has been arrested for her role in this, because it also gives ammunition to the defence team, of course. And of course, they want the jury to be more sympathetic towards the mother, because obviously, even though the focus here is Maddie, any additional emotional leverage is beneficial. Now, the other side of all this is that if Stearns goes to trial and there are charges existing against Jen, then that gives them a possible argument, a possible defence argument. Not only that, we haven't seen what the prosecution, what the detectives, what anyone has against Jen Soto, because no charges have been laid yet, meaning that all evidence relating to Jennifer Soto at the moment it's not public property. There could be information relating to bringing charges against Jen which could somehow prove beneficial for Stearns' defence. But until she is actually charged, none of that has to become public. It's just a file at the moment. There's no need for anyone to know what evidence they've got against Jen at this point in time, because she hasn't been arrested. There's no charges. And if any of that evidence is something that the defence team for Stearns could use, well, it's definitely better off if she's not arrested yet. Because once she is arrested, any evidence against her can be accessed via FOIA, and of course, it can also be seen by the prosecution. I mean, can you imagine the chaos if files on people who have not yet been arrested for anything but are under investigation could be so readily accessed and could become public information in another trial? That would just be mayhem. I mean, a classic example of information that probably shouldn't have been released was in the Madeline Kojikari case. I think she was 12 when she went missing. Neither of her parents reported her missing up until the point when a social worker from her school, a few months later, contacted the parents to say, "Where is Madalena? She's not been in school." Then the mother decided to report her missing. There's been legal stuff going on in the meantime. And then after Madalena's mother, Diana Kojikari, was released from jail after basically being in there for not reporting her daughter missing, she was named as a suspect in the disappearance of her daughter. So she left the country. So you can see all the sorts of problems that arise from releasing information about ongoing cases, basically. So, yes, maybe there is a chance that Jen won't be prosecuted. But I like to think that actually, at the end of the day, the goal, the number one goal right now, is to get that guilty verdict against Stearns. And the state is going to do everything in their power to make sure that happens. And yes, they have got him banged to rights, but it's always good to make sure you've got every single thing that you can possibly rely on lined up. They want to throw as much as at this case as possible. It's better to have too much against this guy than not enough. So I can see why it would be beneficial not to prosecute Jen just yet. And I'm certainly not losing hope. So with that said, let's jump in and take another look at this derivative use interview.
Good morning. We are at the State Attorney's Office in Kissimmee. It's 8:57 a.m. It is April 18th, 2024. I am William J. I am the Division Chief for the Homicide Unit. With me is Danielle Pinnell, also from the Homicide Unit in Kissimmee. Can the detectives identify themselves?
Detective Mark Morris.
Detective Kyle Smallwood.
And with us is
Jennifer Soto.
with your attorney,
Matthew Spark.
Now, I actually went and looked up this lawyer who's acting on Jen's behalf because I was curious. And it took a bit of looking. I actually ended up having to go through the entire Florida bar because I was looking for Spark, S-P-A-R-K, but it's actually spelled S-P-U-L-A-K. So Matthew Splark, I think is actually how you would say it. He's actually not a criminal lawyer or anything like that. He's an insurance lawyer. So I'm guessing that this is someone that Yolanda got for Jen. So of course, if Jen is arrested at some point in time, she will be in need of a actual criminal lawyer.
All right, we went over some things before we went on the record and told you the opportunity to ask any questions that you needed to ask. If you need a break to consult with your attorney, that is absolutely fine. We'll all step out of the room, turn off our recorders, and let you exercise your constitutional right to have counsel. There's no problem with that. There's water fountains here, there's restrooms. I don't know if you're a smoker or not, but like if you get desperate, we can make an outside break time, but we are kind of under time constraints. With that all said, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, this is an investigative subpoena, so you've been compelled to be here. And in our country, under the 5th Amendment and the 14th Amendment as applied to you under the Florida Constitution as well, you cannot be forced to incriminate yourself. So anything you say today can't and won't be used against you unless you just don't tell us the truth. And I've already explained to your attorney, Mr. Bark, whether or not you've made any inconsistent statements in the past, that is dirt under the bridge, and either a misdemeanor was committed or it wasn't, but we're not going to be using that as a basis of some sort of perjury by false statements, because those other charges wouldn't be perjury anyways. So the most important thing today is to tell the truth. I also explained derivative use immunity, which means if you said that there was a gun, and obviously there's no gun in this case, buried in your attorney's yard, we couldn't go dig up that gun if you told us that, oh yeah, there's the gun that was used is right there. We wouldn't be able to do that. We would have to show that we learned all those things independently from this interview. Okay? Do you have any questions? All right, so let's get started.
So in a nutshell, what he said there, aside from saying Mr. Bark now for the lawyer, whereas there was definitely an S when her lawyer said Matthew Spark. In a nutshell, what he's saying there is that basically she's protected under law. They can't make her incriminate herself in this interview and then go after her for it. So if she were to say in this interview, yes, I planned out the entire cover-up, they couldn't go after her for it unless they have discovered that independently for themselves. So anything new that is learned in this interview that they have not been able to discover for themselves through a normal investigation, basically she is protected from prosecution. That is the only protection she has. So things that aren't brought up in this interview, where maybe if they were brought up in this interview, they would show her as being guilty, those things will be obviously quite clearly something that the prosecution can say, look, see, we didn't even have these brought up in the interview. Why am I saying that? Because the thing that you will notice throughout this interview is that there's a lot of gaps in the questioning. There's a lot of things that they skip over, and there's occasions when they suddenly redirect the questioning away from something, and I believe that is because they don't want Jen to incriminate herself in this interview, because it could become one of those battles when she is actually charged where a good defence lawyer would turn around and say, no, you have to throw those charges out because she gave you that information in a derivative use interview. So you will see they steer away from a lot of things in this interview, which is the other thing that gives me hope that Jen will at some point in time be prosecuted.
Before you start, let me just make sure we're clear on the record. Off the record, we had discussed our position on the concerns we have. Ms. Soto was interrogated by law enforcement previously. She was under a tremendous amount of duress and stress, being that her child was missing and then she was found deceased. There's been media hysteria about this. There's been people asking for her to be prosecuted, tarred, feathered, executed. And so with that said, we have the concern that you brought up about if there's something said inconsistent today, not being used against her for filing a false police report.
Right, so for example, if she said something that was false then, and we have no idea that it was false now before this interview, but she comes in and admits that it was false today, we can't use these statements or that admission that it was false against her, just like we couldn't use anything else against her from this interview. Okay? All right.
Okay, I'm going to call a spade a spade. This lawyer who is acting on Jen's behalf is essentially nothing more than a mediator. This is not his area of expertise, so you can tell from that question that he's basically there just to be able to say Jen's got a lawyer. And he's just going to step in where logic tells him you should step in, not anything based on knowledge of criminal law. How ridiculous is it claiming, oh, Jen was so stressed in those interviews? Let's just blame everything she said and everything she did on stress. Sure, because, you know, she looked really, really stressed, didn't she? She can claim to have been stressed out in those interviews, but it's pretty clear that she wasn't. It's pretty clear that she was actually pretty much ambivalent to the fact that her daughter was missing.
My understanding is that on February 25th of this year, you were working at the hotel on Disney property out at Coronado Springs.
Yes.
You
You have to answer
out loud and loud enough to get caught on the record. I know you're upset. I know.
Yes.
All right. And did you get off at 10 p.m.?
Yes.
All right. Did you go directly home?
Yes.
About how long does it take you to get home?
25 to 30 minutes.
And when you get home, who is downstairs, if anybody? You have a two-story, is it a townhome? Is that the best word for it?
Yes, it's at home.
If anybody is downstairs, who is downstairs?
I saw my daughter Madeline and Stefan.
So Jen essentially has a brand new audience here for this interview. You have William J conducting the interview, and obviously he's not seen Jen perform. So I have no doubt when he comments on her being emotional that he's seeing what we've all seen a million times, that is the Jen putting on that fake emotions act. Of course, it could be that she was super anxious about being called in to do this. I mean, she even had to have a lawyer with her, and maybe there is a bit of emotional leakage just from the anxiety of basically being in a room with 4 people and you and your lawyer. That's got to be intimidating. Personally, I think it's just Jen doing her usual act. Now, once again, the strange wording from Jen when she's asked, basically, when she got home, who, if anybody, is downstairs? And her response is, I saw my daughters, Madeline and Stefan. It could be nothing, but it's just a really odd way of responding because it doesn't correspond grammatically. When you got home, who, if anyone, was downstairs? Maddie and Stefan were downstairs. Not I saw my daughter, Maddie and Stefan. How do we know she's even answering the same question? She could just be randomly saying, oh, I got home and I saw Maddie and Stefan. Like I said, it could be nothing. It could just be, once again, because we've seen how very manipulative Jen is, it could be, once again, her intentionally choosing to answer a question in a somewhat non-committal way. Because it is my honest belief that she did not see Maddie on the Sunday night. I've done a video on that, but basically none of the stories she says about the Sunday night sound genuine. But not only that, she claims it was like a half-hour period of time, and I think I counted about 7 different things that she claims occurred during that half-hour period of time. And of course you also have that slip in one of the early interviews when she's asked when was the last time you saw your daughter, and she said Wednesday. That could have just been a slip, and all these things she said occurred downstairs in that half an hour before sending Maddie and Stefan up to bed. Maybe they did happen that way, but I don't know. I'm not overly convinced. So to have her have this somewhat non-committal, I saw Maddie and Stefan, which grammatically does not agree with the question, certainly makes me raise my eyebrows a little bit.
Do you recall what Madeline was wearing?
No.
And do you recall what Stefan was wearing?
I can't tell you. No.
Okay, I will circle back to my thoughts on a mother not being able to remember what their child was wearing the very last time they saw them alive. Because, first of all, this way she answers a question about Stefan. She's been asked, do you do you recall what Maddie was wearing? You get a long pause, you get no. Then the same question about Stefan. Do you recall what he was wearing? Again, you get the pause. And instead of just a no, you get, I can't tell you. No. That to me is a somewhat ambiguous answer. You can't tell them what he was wearing. You won't tell them what he's wearing. Or you don't recall what he was wearing. Yes, she says no after that. But to say, I can't tell you, when you've been asked, do you remember? Again, it's not in agreement with the question. So does she actually know what Stefan was wearing and she just can't tell them for some reason? Doesn't want to tell them, maybe it doesn't look good? Or is she just saying things in an odd way? Now let's go back to her being unable to remember what Maddie was wearing that night, because I find this really disturbing. Now, I've been told that I'm wrong, and that no, not every parent is going to remember in minute detail every little bit of those last moments that they had with their child. Well, from what I understand, from what I've seen in countless other cases where parents have actually had no involvement in their child going missing, for the most part, those last moments are indelibly stuck in a person's mind. This is the last time she saw her daughter. She should be able to remember that precisely. It should be seared in her memory. But let's say, just for a moment, that because she is a bit of a spud and she's not really good at remembering anything, let's say she can't actually remember she can't visualise seeing Maddie that night. Well, here's the thing. She claims that she was straightening up things on the Monday morning. And that's how she came across Maddie's phone in Maddie's room. She also claimed when the dog team wanted more things for the dogs, she told them, well, Maddie's clothes are still on the floor in the bathroom. We've just been walking around them, we haven't touched them. So, basically, even if she hasn't got that visual memory of what Maddie was wearing, she should know, because whatever pyjamas or night clothes that Maddie was wearing should have been either on the floor in Jen's bathroom, which is where she claims that Maddie puts her nightwear when she gets changed, or they should have been in Maddie's room at the top of any pile of clothes that was there, because obviously they were the last things that Maddie wore, even after her birthday dress. So she should, regardless, be able to remember what Maddie was wearing, because even if she could not originally remember, she should still have the memories of the encounters that night, the memories of the conversations, where Maddie sat, all that sort of things. And if at first she forgot what Maddie was wearing, she would have these clues to remind her what Maddie was wearing? Or did Maddie's sleepwear just completely vanish from the house when Maddie vanished? I don't buy it. There is a reason that she's saying she can't remember, and that is either that she never saw Maddie that night, or who knows what else. What I would have liked to have heard from detectives in the interviews with Jen is, in terms of the Sunday night when they were discussing it with her, it would have been good to ask, while you were having this conversation, where was Maddie sitting? Get her to describe where Maddie was sitting, how she was sitting, and see how she reacted to that. See how easily she could have answered that question. Because I suspect that would have been another question that Jen would have had difficulties answering.
When you get home from work, do you need to kind of eat a late dinner before you get settled in for bed?
Yes.
And do you eat there at your home?
Yes.
What do you eat?
I think I had a pub sub waiting for me in the house, a sandwich.
Okay. Did anybody join you in sitting down and eating?
No, I ate in my bedroom.
Now I know I've said this before too, but her response confuses me. So, supposedly, she got home, she saw Maddie and Stefan, who were supposedly downstairs, and then she sat down and ate a pub sub. And the question was, did anyone join you while you were having that pub sub? Essentially, was anyone with you while you were doing that? Basically. No, I ate it in my bedroom. The way she's very specific about location, no, I ate it in my bedroom, says to me that Maddie and Stefan weren't in her bedroom. Because she's saying no one joined her while she was eating her pub sub. She was in her bedroom alone, eating her pub sub when she got home. But then we've been told that in terms of where everyone hangs out in that house, that they hang out in Jen's bedroom. And that they tend not to hang out in that communal living area. Maddie, if she's not in Jen's bedroom, is apparently in her own fake bedroom. Presumably Stefan, if he's not in Jen's bedroom, is upstairs in his own room. So, if what Jen is saying here is correct, and she basically ate her pub sub in her bedroom, alone, where were Maddie and Stefan at the time? Maybe I am overthinking this. Maybe I'm misinterpreting. But it certainly sounds, when you are asked, did someone join you while you were having your pub sub? To then say, no, I ate it in my bedroom, is the same as saying, I ate alone in my bedroom. Nobody came into the bedroom with me. You could say that, well, the interpretation is, did anybody else have a pub sub at the same time? But her response would not agree with that question. No, I ate it in my bedroom. She's giving a location. She's indicating, I ate in this location. Nobody joined me. Meaning I was in this location alone. If she was simply saying, no, I ate this and they watched me, you wouldn't need a location thrown in there. You would get more of a response of, No, they'd already eaten, so it was just me. But she's very specific about location, which to me definitely says she's saying I had ate this alone. There was nobody around at the time that I ate this.
Did it look like anybody else had recently cooked food or eaten any food there that night?
From what I saw, no. I didn't see anyone cooking, or it didn't look like anyone had been cooking.
Okay.
That, of course, is in reference to Stefan's claim that he turned up at the townhouse and he made ramen. It is quite possible that if Jen had a pub sub waiting for her, that she may not have actually looked to see if anyone had been cooking. May just be Jen is super unobservant, so I'm really not putting any weight on that at all. And in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's really important if he had made ramen or not.
I believe in one of your former interviews you mentioned that Madeline might have gone over with you kind of what she got at the birthday party since you didn't have the chance to go because you were at work. Mm-hmm. When and where does that occur?
That occurs like right after I get home. It occurs in my bedroom. Everyone's in my room.
And so by everyone, let's just be clear since I understand you have some roommates. So what do you mean by everyone?
Okay. Madeline, Stefan, and myself were in my bedroom.
Okay.
Now, I get the need for a extremely rigid, guided approach to this interview. They don't want Jen basically giving a long-winded story of this is everything that happened, because it makes it harder for them to control when they don't want her to bring up things that they want to hold against her at a later date. Hence the reason the very specific questions. There are some things they don't want to discuss with Jen, like I said, because those are things which could incriminate Jen and be used at a later date for prosecution. So if she's allowed free rein to just say it all her way, they can't control that. But the thing is here, these limited questions are getting limited answers that seem ambiguous. So after her claiming that she came home and ate a pub sub alone in her bedroom, now the story is that right after she got home, she had this conversation with Maddie about her birthday and her birthday gifts and everything. And she specifically says that this occurred right after she got home. Everybody was in her room. So already Jen has split into an alternate reality or an alternate universe. In one universe, Jen has come home, grabbed a pub sub, sat alone in her room and ate that pub sub. And then in this other alternate reality, she's come home and everyone was already in her room by the sounds of it, and they sat around and spoke about Maddie's birthday. And you're not getting clarifying questions because, I guess, at the moment, in terms of timeline, this probably isn't hugely significant in terms of Stefan, in terms of prosecuting Stefan. But for us, for those of us who are listening, it's frustrating.
At this point in time, do you recall what Madeline was wearing?
I don't know.
Let me ask it a different way. Can you tell me whether or not she was wearing a long-sleeved green sweatshirt and jeans?
Oh, no.
Okay. Would she have kind of been in her bed gear, or do you think she could have still been in the dress that she wore to her birthday celebration?
She would have been in pajamas. I can't recall the exact pajamas, but she would have been in pajamas. She had already, by this point in the evening, she had already showered and changed out of that birthday dress.
So, obviously the goal here is to establish the fact that Stefan redressed Maddie before he took her out to St. Cloud. Hence the question, first of all, if Maddie was wearing the clothes that she was found in, basically. And Jen is like, no, she would have been in pyjamas. Would have. So, not only can you not recall what she was wearing the last time you saw her, but your memory is so bad that you can only make a prediction. She would have been in pyjamas, not what? No, she was in pyjamas. She would have been in pyjamas. But hey, I can't remember which ones. She'd already showered and changed out of her birthday dress. And, well, clearly at some point in time, she or someone changed her out of those pyjamas into those day clothes, meaning the pyjamas should have been somewhere visible. But even being prompted again, all she can offer here is she would have been in pyjamas. Logically, she would have been in pyjamas. I'm not saying she definitely was in pyjamas, I'm just saying she would have been, because she'd already changed out of that dress. So what I'm essentially saying here is that even here, she's not prompted to recall what sort of pyjamas Maddie was wearing, and B, it's still a bit vague. Maybe you could say it that way, but I would expect a definite no, she was in pyjamas. The would have been sounds more like a hypothetical situation. Had I come home from work and Maddie was still up and we were talking, yeah, she would have been in pyjamas at that point in time. Because honestly, my belief is that Maddie was quite possibly already passed out upstairs, already asleep, or drugged out when Jen got home.
And was it your understanding from your sister that she had gotten dropped off about 8:30, she being Madeline?
8:30, 8:45, something around that time, yeah.
And what's your understanding as to when Stefan had gotten there? If you know. If you don't guess, it's fine.
Now, I'm actually going to revisit this whole would have been in pyjamas in just a moment, because what you get here is Jen being asked what time Maddie was dropped off. Now, she knows what time Maddie was dropped off. She was clear about that in every single interview that she did. She was also clear in every interview that she did about what time Stefan arrived back, or arrived at the townhouse. In one interview, she claims that he actually contacted her and said, Maddie's getting herself ready for bed, she's doing all her usual nighttime stuff. That's gone out the window, apparently. So she's being less committal here and saying Maddie arrived sometime between 8:30 and 8:45. Why is she doing this? So, if you've watched my videos where I've broken down the unredacted interviews, in the interview that Stefan did with Detective Tagler and Detective Acosta, they really nailed him in terms of the inconsistencies in his timeline. And of course, after that interview, you had Jen and Stefan sitting for over 4 hours in Jen's car having who knows what sort of conversation. And then, because of that, I'm guessing, after that point in time, Jen suddenly becomes reluctant to give exact times. Suddenly she's unsure of exact times. And I think that's probably still at the back of her mind when she's answering these questions here. The knowledge that they do have surveillance, they do have information, they have data. So she's probably going to be non-committal with anything that she cannot 100% verify herself because she wasn't there. So even though in all the interviews she said 8:30, and she should be extremely confident about that because obviously Stephanie would have told her, now she's going to go with 8:30 to 8:45 and claim that she doesn't know when Stefan arrived. If you recall, in at least one of her interviews, she claimed that Stefan phoned her when he arrived. Because, of course, apparently, anytime the pair of them are separated, they're on the phone to each other. But now, according to her, she doesn't know when Stefan arrived. So, maybe it's possible that this whole non-committal, she would have been in pyjamas, is not so much about her not knowing what Maddie was wearing, or not even having a vague idea, or not seeing Maddie or anything, but maybe it is about being careful not to say the wrong thing. She doesn't want to be 100% positive. Yeah, she was definitely wearing pyjamas, and is stepping back a bit just so she doesn't get caught out for lying. She would have been wearing pyjamas because that's what you would expect. Personally, I still believe that Jen did not see Maddie on the Sunday night, hence the reason she's got no idea what Maddie was wearing. I also find it incredibly disturbing that in the photos that we've seen for the townhouse, I have not been able to spot anything either in or around the washing basket or on the floor in Jen's bathroom that looks like Maddie's pyjamas. And that does concern me.
Actually, while he's saying that, this is important. So there's things that you might think should be a certain way because that's just the way things go. But don't just guess based on past history that it's the same as what happened on that particular day. If you don't know, you don't know.
Then yeah, I'm not sure exactly what time he got there.
Okay. You were at work, so I just didn't know if, like, sometimes families check in, hey, I made it, by text or by phone call or anything like that. Do you not remember any of that?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Now, you could use the excuse, well, it's been 6 weeks, so of course she's possibly forgotten things. But that again goes back to when something significant like that happens, you remember so many details. You remember everything, every little minute detail. So her saying that she can't remember just doesn't fit. Now, what he's done here is he's basically given her an attempt to jog her memory, where he's done this question of, you know, in families quite often they might let each other know, I've arrived. Do you remember anything like that? And she's like, no, I don't remember. So he hasn't asked her outright, how come you said that Stefan contacted you and said Maddie said these things? Because if she's lying here, or if she was lying there, obviously in this interview, we don't want to suddenly have her say, yeah, I lied about that, because then they can't prosecute her for these lies that she's told detectives prior to this time. So he very quickly skips over it. He doesn't make it specific as in, you said this, or is it possible that this happened between you and Stefan? He just makes it a very general, in some families this happens. Do you recall anything like this happening? So he's been very careful not to ask her directly, how come you said Stefan contacted you?
How long were the three of you in your bedroom?
I'm going to say for about 30 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did Madeline tell you about the party?
She was really happy.
Did she tell you what food they had there at the party? Or?
Yeah, they had her favorites.
What are her favorites?
Puerto Rican food. So arroz con gandules.
All right, so you're gonna have to translate to English. I know frioles and arroz and a couple other things, but help me out.
If I recall correctly, she had requested rice. It's a type of rice and beans.
Mm-hmm.
It's rice with pigeon peas.
Okay.
And pernil, which is, I'm not sure how to. It's a pork, but I'm not sure how they cook it.
Okay.
So it's cooked pork. That's typically what she requests for her parties. That's like her favorite meal.
Okay.
So he asks her, did Madeline tell you about the party? And she's all set to go into her well-rehearsed narrative. So you hear her start quietly with, she was really happy, and he cuts her off. Instead of letting her continue with that well-rehearsed story, he asks her about food. Did Madeline tell you what food they had? And this is another one of those things that makes me think that Jen may not have seen Maddie on the Sunday night. Because what does she say? If I recall correctly, she'd requested, and then she lists off these foods. And then she apparently finds it funny because he doesn't know what they are. But the wording there, if I recall correctly, she had requested. So she's not saying she told me she had these things. She's referring to possibly when they were planning the party. But certainly she's not saying this is what Maddie told me. This is what I know that she had requested for the party. There's a difference. There's a huge difference. For all we know, she may have requested those things and maybe something else was cooked instead. And then after the list, she finishes with, that's typically what she requests for parties. So to me, that says that actually Jen probably had no knowledge whatsoever of actually if those foods were what were cooked at the party. She's just guessing here. She didn't have a conversation with Maddie about the foods. It's all guesswork. If I recall correctly, she requested these things. Not if I recall correctly, she said this is what we had. And then to finish it off with, because, essentially that's typically what she requests. The logic there being, this is typically what she requests, so I believe this is probably what was had.
And what kind of gifts did she get?
She got a lot of money.
Okay.
That's what she ended up showing me. I think she had a few trinkets, but like most of it was just a big wad of money that she was so excited for.
All right.
Okay, Jen is showing us her own values here. She's talking about Maddie getting a lot of money, and she got a big lot of money that she was so excited for. And you get this little laugh afterwards. But why I'm saying she is showing her own values here, because, like I said, she's like, the first thing she comes out with is she got a lot of money. And she thinks that's significant, she has her little chuckle about it. When she talks about presents, she refers to them as a few trinkets. Now, in my mind, when I think trinkets, and I'm not sure if you have these in the United States, but in Australia at Christmas time we have Christmas crackers. Basically, they're these things that look like bonbons. They're a cardboard tube with fancy Christmassy looking wrapping around it, and then the ends are open and it's got a strip that runs right through that's got a little bit of gunpowder in the middle where it's attached, and you pop it open with another person, and inside you get this stupid paper hat, you get a joke, and you get a trinket, which is basically a cheap plastic toy, something like a plastic whistle or a little pack of playing cards that's so small that you couldn't even do anything with them, or a plastic magnifying glass that doesn't really do anything. That's what, in my mind, a trinket is. It is something of zero value, zero worth, something that you don't really need and you don't really want. So to me, her referring to Maddie's gifts as trinkets, to her, whatever gifts people give you, they're not significant. For her, the number one thing of importance is money. Now, we know that poor Maddie only got a few gifts. Her friend said that at one point in time she only saw one gift on the table. I also got the impression from what was said by various people that Maddie was disappointed because she didn't feel like she got enough money. And let me know where that comes from, because I know it's stuck in my mind. It's probably one of those side interviews that I've only listened to a few times, but it's something that is stuck in my mind as solid. I know that's what she said. So basically, based on this a few trinkets comment and the a wad of money, I can't help thinking that, again, this conversation did not occur, and that Jen herself is basically inserting her own opinions of what Maddie got. Because I think, were Maddie alive today and we were to ask her, what did you get for your 13th birthday, we might get a different version of that. Just something as simple as, where's the specifics? What are these trinkets that she got? Do tell.
Is there any particular reason Stefan couldn't make it up to the party? Because it's my understanding he didn't exactly work or anything.
He wouldn't have been invited. The party was held at my mom's house, and my mom and him have never had a great relationship. She's never liked him. So he wouldn't have been invited to the party at all. It just would have been my whole family, and then me. If I hadn't worked, I would have been there.
Okay.
Finally, a little bit of honesty from Jen. Yeah, Stefan would not have been invited because, basically, none of her family actually like him. Did you notice how when she said it would have just been my family and me, and then the volume dropped if I hadn't been working? She knows that was a low move for her as Maddie's mother to prioritise work over Maddie's birthday. And sure, she can argue all she likes, oh, it was a new job, because the shifts were, I was doing different shifts, they were changing, yada yada, had to learn different parts of the routine, etc. Sure, she could try and argue it that way, that she had no choice. She only had that job, supposedly, for a few weeks. If she would have known at the time that she accepted that position that Maddie's 13th birthday was coming up. So to me, there's no excuse for her missing Maddie's birthday. She could have actually said, look, when you're doing my shifts, I would really like to be there for my daughter's 13th birthday celebrations. Because if you really cared about it, your daughter only turns 13 once. And as it turned out, that was her very last birthday. Because Jen was too bloody selfish, too self-centred, she wasn't there for her daughter's last birthday. And I think that she knows that she's done the wrong thing there. That's why you get the sudden quiet voice, because she knows that that is a pretty low act for a mother, to not even be bothered attending your daughter's 13th birthday.
Now, during this 30 minutes that the three of you are in your bedroom, is Madeline engaging in any of her kind of nighttime routine, or, getting ready for bed? What else is going on, if anything?
We spent a long time talking about gifts and having her show me, and then we counted out her money. I can't remember if she had finished with all of her bedtime routine.
So he wants to know what was happening during that half an hour, if Maddie had finished her nighttime routine. Basically, what were they doing for that 30 minutes? And we get from Jen, because you can't remember the last time you were with your child? It does my head in to hear her do this and the long pause. It's not something that you should need to stop and think about. It should be indelibly stuck in your brain. It should be something that you've gone through in your brain countless times. Something that plays like a movie in your brain. So that when that question is asked, you should be able to just about recite every second of those 30 minutes. But instead we get this and this pause. And then she says the most ridiculous thing. We spent a long time talking about her gifts. Oh, these are the a few trinkets that she got, is it, Jen? But because how can you spend a long time talking about a few trinkets? The way you're talking about it pretty much minimises it. Sound like she got cheap crap that's really insignificant that you wouldn't spend a lot of time talking about. So how can you spend a lot of time talking about her gifts? It's a total contradiction. Now they're gifts, they're not little trinkets. And then more absurdity. Then we counted out her money. Why is that absurd? Think back to when you were 13. Getting money for gifts is a big thing because chances are there's something really important that you want for yourself that you couldn't have unless you could buy it for yourself. Or just the thought of being able to go shopping with your own money. Maybe you're saving up for something. It is exciting as a child to be given money. Unless, of course, you're one of those, sort of overindulged kids that just gets anything they want. But I suspect that Jen was one of those parents who would rather spend money on herself than on Maddie. So I think it was significant for Maddie to get money. Now we know that before her birthday she was doing that little bit of bragging that kids like to do to her best friend, saying that she gets a lot of money for her birthday. We also know that she was apparently disappointed because she didn't get as much money as she hoped. Why am I saying all these things? There's no way that Maddie would have not counted that money long before Jen got home. In all likelihood, even before she left Yolanda's place, she probably could have told you exactly how much money she got for her birthday. Maybe she counted it when she got home before she started doing her routine. But I would be pretty certain that she knew before she even left Yolanda's how much money she had. Why would she need to count it again with Jen? Unless, of course, Jen was doing that narcissistic, passive-aggressive thing and questioning if Maddie had actually counted the money properly and wanted her to count it again just so Jen could check that she had counted right. Or maybe because Jen is a narcissist and puts herself first, maybe she was then planning on borrowing money from Maddie's birthday money to pay for her Botox the next day. So maybe she did make Maddie count it again, just to be sure, because maybe it fell short and it didn't reach the... How much did she say? It was something like $400 or something. Still, to me, none of that sounds likely. How can you spend a long time talking about two gifts that, in your words, are trinkets? And how long would it take to count out the money? Not that long, because at the end of the day, when you give people money for gifts, you give them notes, you give them certain amounts, $20, $25, $50. It's not that hard to count.
Okay. Does she brush her teeth at night?
In the shower.
In the shower? Okay.
Uh-huh.
And that occurred before you got home?
Yeah.
And my understanding with her nighttime medication is that's something that you would like to make sure she had bedtime or so?
Something like that, yeah.
So were you present for that occurring, or did that occur after you got home?
That did not occur on my call. I believe I had instructed Maddie when she got home to go ahead and take them herself.
Okay. And is that something that she's allowed to do?
From time to time, yeah.
Again, we get some odd comments from Jen. He's asking about Maddie taking her meds. And what does she reply with? That did not occur on my call. It's like saying, I'm not responsible. It has nothing to do with me. It wasn't my call. Don't look at me in terms of her nighttime meds. Now that we've heard the jailhouse calls, where some of the things that Stefan says in terms of the autopsy make me think that the toxicology results are perhaps a little bit concerning. And that there is something in the toxicology results that may indicate that it wasn't just about Maddie being strangled, but she may have also been drugged. So to hear Jen say, essentially, it didn't happen on my watch, is very much a, if you find anything, I'm innocent, don't look at me kind of reaction. And then we get this next comment, which to me is still a little bit concerning. I believe I had instructed Maddie when she got home to go ahead and take them herself. Now, if I'm saying I believe something, it means that, well, I probably wasn't really there. This is just something I've been told, but I believe it's true. When you say I believe, you're basically saying, I think this is true, but I can't prove it. Well, wouldn't you know if you had instructed your daughter to go ahead and take her medications when she got home? Maybe the truth here is that she had asked Stefan to give Maddie her medications. Because we do hear a few times that Stefan has been responsible on previous occasions for giving Maddie her medications. And we know that he turned up at 8:45. In earlier interviews, Jen claims that he let her know that he was there. So was the arrangement for him to actually give Maddie her meds like they normally would? And then they've decided to put it back on Maddie and say, actually, this one time, even though, Jen is super vigilant about Maddie's meds and so scared of Maddie taking the wrong meds and everything, this one time, it was actually Maddie. It had nothing to do with Stefan, nothing to do with Jen. To me, her saying, I believe I had instructed her, makes me question if that is indeed what happened.
When you say they, is there, what my understanding was there was some hydroxyzine. Is there anything else she takes at night?
Just hydroxyzine.
All right. And the Miralax is when?
Miralax is...
So that would have been earlier while you were at work too if she took it?
Yeah.
May not have because she was at the party?
Yeah, because I had been training at work that week and we had been going back and forth with my moms a lot, the Miralax wasn't consistent.
Okay.
So what we get her saying here is he's asking her about Maddie's drugs and everything. And when she gets to talking about the Miralax, she says it wasn't consistent. And then we get that weird half laugh from her. Now, looking at the context of that, I think we can now say that that half laugh that she does is actually her showing contempt. She was annoyed with Yolanda because Yolanda didn't make Maddie take her medications. So for her, that is a cause of disdain. Now, can I just say how disgusting I think it is that not only was this poor child getting the Judy Garland treatment, basically uppers through the day, downers through the night to make her sleep, but that this parent could see that they were having a negative effect on her, and she had to have Miralax on a daily basis. Wouldn't you want to question whether you are doing the right thing by your child by pumping all these drugs into them, knowing the physical effect that they are actually having on this child? Apparently it was of no concern to Jen. The only concern to Jen is that Yolanda didn't force Maddie to take her meds. And apparently Jen wasn't happy about this.
All right, now, Madeline, does she lay out her clothes for school the next day, or is that something she gets in the morning, makes a game time decision like my kid?
Typically, it is a game time decision morning of.
Okay. What about this specific evening? Do you remember anything about it?
Yes. This evening, we had, I had already discussed prior to Stefan coming to visit that he was going to help me take Maddie to school that day. So because I knew that that was what was going to happen that night, I had asked Maddie, pick out your clothes, have everything ready, have your backpack ready, your water bottle, everything you need ready, so that way you could just grab your stuff and head out. It won't be too much of a hassle in the morning. And so she did. She picked out her clothing. I asked her what she was wearing, and she told me what she had picked out. I said, okay, fine.
So here we get the question, basically, is it a game time decision for Maddie getting ready in the morning, or do you get her to get everything ready the night before? And you get this huge sigh from Jen. Of course, we know why she's sighing there. This is going back to probably one of the very first lies that she told police. When she's asked to give a description of Maddie, and she gives a description of what Maddie's wearing. And even in her statement, she writes, I saw my daughter getting ready for school. So we have this original story from Jen of seeing Maddie in the morning. And that's why she knows what Maddie's wearing. And then when she's called out on it, she said, well, actually, no, I didn't see Maddie, but I know what she was wearing because I got her to pick out her clothes the night before. So I think that's why we're getting the sigh from her. And then we get this story of, well, I knew Stefan was going to be coming and helping me, so that evening I told her to do all these things. Pick out your clothes, fill up your drink bottle, put your stuff in your bag, all that stuff that she's just gone through. Well, here's the thing that makes that really interesting for me. This is another part or another alternate reality for that half-hour period of time. What are teenagers like when you give them instructions like this? Stuff that's not the most exciting stuff to do. They're not going to rush to do it. They're going to dilly-dally around. So if Maddie was supposed to do all these things, and apparently she did, according to Jen, well, there goes probably 15 minutes of that half an hour that Jen's talking about. That half an hour when Jen sat on her own and had a pub sub. That half an hour when apparently the first thing she did, not the first thing she did when she sat on her own and had her pub sub, but the other first thing she did. Because, you know, there's at least two alternate realities here. The first thing she did was sit down in her bedroom with Maddie and Stefan and talk about Maddie's party. And apparently they spent all this time talking about Maddie's gifts. The few trinkets. And now, in amongst all that, Maddie's also gone and prepared all her stuff for school the next day. It's a very, very busy half-hour period of time. And of course, we also have Jen here saying that she then asked her what she was wearing after Maddie had done all this. So there was another conversation that occurred in that half-hour period of time where Maddie apparently told her what she was wearing. And Jen said, okay, fine. Well, here's the thing. Maddie was 13. My niece was choosing her outfits when she was 8. And my sister had no say in the matter. Maddie looks to me like that same sort of girl who knew what she liked and was going to wear what she wanted to wear. You see her in all these gorgeous little outfits in these photos. So I suspect that, like my niece, Maddie was choosing her own outfits from a very, very young age. But not only that, we know that Maddie pretty much had a school outfit. We've heard that from her best friend, and we've heard that from teachers. The teacher that said, when I heard what she was wearing, I thought, that sounds like what she would normally be wearing. So this whole thing of sending her to choose her clothes, and apparently Jen had to give approval and says, okay, fine, just doesn't ring true to me. Maddie would have known what she wanted to wear to school. She wouldn't have needed to get it out the night before, because it was probably the first thing that comes to hand. Because when you have ADHD, if you have clothes that are your go-to, and that is one of the things about ADHD, you do tend to wear a lot of the same things because it saves you having to think about choosing what to wear. So chances are those clothes, either had they been washed, wouldn't have actually been put away anywhere. They were probably sitting somewhere in Maddie's room ready for when she went to school next. Or if they hadn't been washed, they were probably dumped somewhere where Maddie could just grab them quickly and put them on. Because that's what you do when you have ADHD. So I don't buy any of this from Jen. Especially given that, according to Jen, the biggest cause of arguments between them is Maddie not keeping her room tidy. Well, she's a teenager. I would imagine that not keeping her room tidy would definitely include not putting her clothes in the right spot.
All right, so she picks it out, but does she physically take it out of somewhere, wherever she stores her clothes, and put it somewhere?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure if she took that clothes upstairs with her or anything like that.
All right. So as far you didn't see them in your room, and did you have the opportunity to kind of see her cubby part of the living room to see if she had put them on her bed or anything like that?
I hadn't seen them.
So you're so concerned about your child being able to get themselves ready in a timely fashion the next morning because you're going to sleep in and you're not going to be supervising it. So you send them off to pick out their clothes. But then you don't even go and check to see if they actually did do it. Really? Because the way Jen talks makes me think that she infantilized Maddie. She believed Maddie wasn't even capable of taking her own meds properly. So why would she believe that Maddie was capable of actually picking out her clothes and getting them out like she was told? Based on the way Jen talks about Maddie, I would expect that if she had told Maddie to get her clothes out, that she would basically expect that she needed to see for herself because of how little she thinks of Maddie. She seems to think that Maddie is incapable of doing anything. She has this negative opinion of Maddie. She needs to be in control. She would have checked had this actually occurred. But you know what is more disturbing than that? This comment of, I don't know, or I'm not sure if she took them upstairs with her. So very calmly she says that. The reason that is so disturbing to me is because basically she's saying that she's not sure if Maddie took them upstairs with her, meaning that it's acceptable for Maddie to get changed in front of Stefan. Because if she's taking them upstairs with her, she's not going to take them upstairs with her and then bring them back downstairs again to get dressed the next morning, is she? She's taking them upstairs with her so she can get dressed upstairs, in the room where she is sharing with Stefan. And that apparently doesn't ring alarm bells for Jen. Is this something that happened regularly, Maddie just getting dressed in front of Stefan? Were there occurrences in the past when Maddie was encouraged to take her clothes upstairs with her and get changed upstairs? The more things this woman says, the more disturbed I become.
Does Madeline have like a water bottle or a hydro flask or whatever the kids call it that she likes to sleep with and bring up or bring wherever she's sleeping?
Typically not. That stays downstairs in her backpack, and then she'll clean it in the morning and then fill it back up and just leave it in her backpack. That typically stays in the backpack.
Okay.
Now, I know I have covered this in a previous video, but, since we are going through this entire interview again, I think this is important to say. She's been asked about Maddie's water bottle. And according to Jen, after a pause, because apparently Jen has to think about all these things, she doesn't seem to be able to have immediate recall when it comes to Maddie's life, anything to do with Maddie's life. So what she's saying here is that typically Maddie's water bottle stays in the backpack, and then she pulls it out in the morning, cleans it, fills it back up, and it goes back in the backpack. Well, here's what's really interesting, and something that has never been commented on by Jen in any of her interviews. See, we have the advantage here of having seen all the forensic photos. We've seen the contents of Maddie's backpack. One of the things that wasn't in Maddie's backpack was her water bottle. Her laptop was in there, school books, hand sanitizer, stuff like that. No water bottle. When we look at the images of the kitchen at the townhouse, one of the first things you see, it's so obvious it nearly smacks you in the face, is 2 water bottles sitting side by side on the kitchen bench. 2 matching water bottles, one black and one pink, which to me says that they were bought at the same time for 2 people who are connected, who live together, are family. Not just because they are matching, but because they are sitting side by side. Well, yeah, it could be Natalie and her son, but it seems to me that those flatmates usually kept pretty much everything upstairs. We don't see water bottles anywhere in Jen's bedroom. We don't see water bottles anywhere in Maddie's fake bedroom. So to me that says that those 2 matching water bottles belong to Jen and Maddie. And the thing is, walking out of Jen's room, that would have to be one of the first things you see when you walk out of her room. Walking in the door of the townhouse, that's probably one of the first things you see when you walk in the door of the townhouse. Jen has never mentioned Maddie went to school without her water bottle that day. What if she's had nothing to drink all day? What if whoever's got her doesn't give her a drink? You never hear her comment on the fact that Maddie's drink bottle is still at home. And even here, and I think that's what they're trying to find out, without actually going too far into this, because, like I said, you will see that there are questions that they ask Jen and they choose not to go further with those questions. And I think there is a good reason for that. I think that these are things that they want to keep up their sleeve for prosecuting Jen. There's no comment from Jen whatsoever here about, yeah, well, she should have had it in her backpack, but you know what? I saw it on the kitchen bench. Jen knew Maddie didn't have her water bottle. It is never mentioned by Jen.
Favorite stuffed animal or stuffed animals? Anything that always goes with her wherever she's sleeping?
She does have a few stuffies and blankies. Did I see any that day?
Yeah, specifically, did you see if she brought any of that stuff upstairs with her?
No, I didn't see any of that stuff upstairs.
Okay, I'm just going to jog your memory a little bit here. In that long video interview that Jen did, when she's having that psychic phase, where she's suddenly saying all these things that she thinks may have happened to Maddie, and seems to be pretty damn accurate with all of them. When they ask her, how do you think Maddie died? How do you think he unalived her? And her comment is, well, I think he must have drugged her or choked her, because how else would you do it and not leave a mess? And then she pauses and says, was there a mess? Because I didn't go upstairs. Something that, of course, everybody remembers because it is such a callous thing to discuss in the first place. Her saying that she thinks her daughter was choked or drugged. But she makes it quite clear there that she didn't go upstairs. So, you know, she's just making assumptions here. Was there a mess? Was there evidence? Because I didn't go upstairs, so I wouldn't know. But this conversation here, he asks her, does Maddie have favourite stuffed animals? And she's like, yeah, she has a few stuffies and a few blankets. And then the question is, did you see any of that stuff that day? Now, my thoughts are that this question, the direction of this, was basically in relation to Natalie's statement, where she talks about having been contacted by Jen and told that Maddie's missing, goes into Maddie's room and sees all these blankets and stuffies in a big pile on Maddie's bed, and it was out of place, and she comments it was out of place. And I suspect that the question here was with regards to that. They want to know if she thinks, if she saw that, if she thought that was out of place. But they're not asking her direct leading questions. They're giving her all these open questions to see what her answers are. So you would expect, given that she apparently went into Maddie's room and spotted the phone because she was straightening up, you would expect if those things were dumped there through the day, perhaps later on after somebody had taken them from the upstairs room, washed them, and then dumped them there, you would expect that to be what she comments on here. Yeah, there were these things dumped on Maddie's bed, which weren't there in the morning when I went in to straighten up and collected her phone. But instead, the response we get from Jen is, no, I didn't see any of that stuff upstairs. You didn't see any of that stuff upstairs, Jen. Because you can see through the ceiling? Or is that part of your psychic powers, that you have visions as well? Because you told the detectives that you never went upstairs. You don't know if there was evidence or if there was a mess because you never went upstairs. But now you're saying you didn't see Maddie's blankies or stuffies upstairs, which basically is implying that you did go upstairs. So, which is it?
Now, separate question. Generally, habitually, like your attorney was saying, there's a difference between specific memory. But generally, would she do that? Not saying that you saw it that night.
Generally, would she do what?
Have stuffies and blankets and her favorite stuff.
Yes. She typically would.
So if Stefan says something like Maddie's building her nest and getting settled in, would that to you mean like her stuff is part of this nest, or what do you think that would mean, if you know?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you recall getting that text from Stefan that night that Maddie had settled into her nest for the night?
I don't remember that text now.
Okay.
She doesn't remember that text. She doesn't even know what it means. If someone messages you something that you don't understand and you just accept it, no, you ask for clarification. Clearly, she understood what he meant when he sent her that text. And it certainly sounds like she had blankets and stuffies up there with her. I think Jen is definitely being evasive here. Especially because, like I said before, your child goes missing. Every single moment of that last night that you had with your child is going to be stuck indelibly in your brain. But not only that, she's now had 6 weeks to come to terms with the fact that Stefan was responsible. Your child has gone missing, your child has been found unalived, and you find that your ex-boyfriend is responsible for it. You're going to be going through every single last moment from the moment he arrived the night before up until the moment he was arrested, looking for signs of guilt. That is, unless of course you already knew what had happened and they weren't signs of guilt to you because you knew, so it wasn't like sudden epiphanies like, oh wow, yeah, he said this or he did this. Because you were in on it the whole time, so none of it was a surprise to you. So, apparently, in her mind, she never, after finding out what happened to Maddie, never questioned him sending her those texts. Not only did she never question them, she promptly forgot them. I don't buy that. If she truly was uninvolved, she knew nothing, then I would have imagined she would have played that through her head so many times by the time she got to this interview that she would definitely remember that text. I'm pretty certain they wouldn't have wiped her phone before giving it back to her. So that text would have still been on her phone. Wouldn't you go back over the texts from the night your daughter went missing, looking for clues? Your last bits of communication with the monster who was responsible? But apparently Jen doesn't remember any of it. And no, she never saw Maddie's things upstairs. However that works, considering that she apparently never went upstairs.
My understanding was that at some point you told them it was time to go to bed.
Yeah.
Do you recall about what time that was?
Around 11 o'clock.
So that's consistent with getting home at 10:30, having this half-hour discussion and eating your pub sub? Is that a yes?
Yes.
All right. Do they comply with your wishes to go upstairs when you say that at about 11 o'clock?
Yes, they do.
Is there any further communication between either you and Madeline or you and Stefan about, all right, kids, it's time to go to bed, anything like that? Or was that the last you had heard from either one of them that night?
I think at some point Stefan comes downstairs to use the restroom and then goes back upstairs, but after that I don't recall interacting or saying anything, so.
Okay.
Again, this is the last night that Maddie was alive. She knows Stefan was responsible. And yet, apparently, he asks her if there was any further interaction after she sent them upstairs. And all she can remember is Stefan coming down at some point in time to use the restroom. That's all. Nothing more, folks. Nothing else happened. And yet we know that there was a text from Jen to Stefan basically telling him that Maddie needed to go to bed now. A message that occurred 15 minutes after Maddie's phone went upstairs. Again, that should be indelibly stuck in her mind. She should have gone through that night in her mind so many times, trying to understand what happened, trying to piece the puzzle pieces together for herself. She should have gone through all those text messages from that last night. Maybe several times. Because that's what you do after your child has gone missing. That's what you do after you discover that the person that you supposedly trusted is responsible for your child no longer being around. But apparently she's never looked at these text messages since. She's got no recollection of messaging Stefan and saying Maddie needs to go to bed now. I just find it so unlikely, considering the circumstances. Sure, if you asked me what messages I had sent to my sister 6 weeks ago, I couldn't tell you. But this is a significant night. Like I said, they don't delete your phone when they download it. she would have got her phone back exactly as it was when she gave it to the detectives. So, unless when Stefan's phone was taken, she had deleted messages and these are messages that they actually recovered, unless that occurred, those messages should have still been on her phone. And I just find it so hard to believe that she would not have read through them, trying to get her head around what happened. To me, this sounds like more of an admission of guilt from her. And you'll notice this is another one of those instances where they don't specifically ask her, what about these text messages? They just move on. Quite often, when she's being evasive or when she lies, they just move straight on and they don't try and get more from her. The goal here is obviously this interview is here to get more evidence against Stearns. They've got the evidence already of those text messages. So for the sake of prosecuting Stearns, they don't need her to say it in this interview. For the sake of prosecuting Jen, it's better if they don't question the fact in this interview that she had those messages, because it is a derivative use interview. They don't want to go down that path when she seems to have openly left out information or lied to them.
And my understanding is that you had some sort of parental controls over Maddie's phone. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure by parental controls exactly. I didn't have any limits or anything on the phone set up.
Well, like, for instance, if she wanted to install Game Pigeon, does that have to go through you?
Yeah. So any permissions for any apps, she would have to ask me for.
All right, and does that ring a bell as to occurring that Sunday? Game Pigeon?
I don't remember.
Okay.
So, ever since I heard that, I've been racking my brain. What was going on here in this part of the conversation? Why is he asking her about permissions in terms of downloading apps on the phone, etc.? And why specifically ask about Game Pigeon? Because I'd never even heard of Game Pigeon. So I decided to look it up. Now, Game Pigeon is a multiplayer gaming app, but it's not like your your shoot 'em out type games. It's apparently classic games. Now, the game has a chat option, which is through iMessage. So the game is actually an extension of iMessage, meaning that it's actually a game that kids can use for chatting that's hidden away from parents. If you don't know it's there, you might not actually be aware of it because of the connection with iMessage. So it's that connection, it's hidden away. So it is actually something that kids can use without parents knowing. And now I don't know if this is the same with Android, but when you install an app on your phone, on your iPhone, you can of course hide the icon for that app, meaning that the icon doesn't go anywhere on the home screen. So I started thinking about this and I thought, well, why is this significant? Because we know that Stefan has an Android phone. Apparently, Game Pigeon only works with people who are in your contacts, so you can't use it with just random strangers. But of course, you can always add someone to your contacts. But it provides a way of chatting privately. This is what I understand from the research I've done this morning. It gives that option of a private chat. So going back to the question of, it's an iOS game, it's an iOS app, and there isn't an Android app equivalent. So theoretically, if you have Game Pigeon, you can't chat with someone through Game Pigeon who has an Android phone. Theoretically. But I decided to dig just a little bit deeper. Turns out, if you have a bit of an understanding of coding, then you can actually use Game Pigeon with an Android phone. You actually have to modify the coding of the app itself so that you can make it work on an Android phone. And there's instructions that you can access. There's guides online that you can access that'll tell you how to do that. Is that something that Stefan is capable of doing? Heck yeah. This guy had a massive online presence. This guy was a gamer. And honestly, most gamers, you can pretty much guarantee that at some point in time in their life, they've done coding. It just seems to be one of those nerd things. If you're a gamer, you've fiddled around with coding at some point in time. Given what Stefan's like, I wouldn't be surprised if in the past he's used coding to create cheats on online games. So I can see it being something that really wouldn't be a struggle for him. So now that we know what it is, and now that we know that someone with a little bit of knowledge could actually use Game Pigeon on an Android phone, is this something significant? Is it something that was only installed on that Sunday? Or is it something that was installed another time and maybe Maddie only accessed it that Sunday? Or is there more to the story here? Did she install it herself to chat with her friends? Secretly behind Jen's back? Was Jen unaware of this occurring? Now, some of you may have heard of a channel called, is it Oblivious Benson? I've only looked at her things a few times. She's actually incredibly smart, and she knows a lot when it comes to IT kind of stuff. And she actually did a deep dive into Stefan and Jen's online profiles. Jen has a minimal online profile, but Stefan has a massive online profile, and we know that. We've been told that he was on Telegram the night that he unalived Maddie. We know he was on Reddit. He may have had Discord, we're not sure. I suspect he probably did, given that his friend Frank brought it up as something that I think he actually said Stefan used it, but Frank himself said that he sometimes uses Discord. Who knows what other things Stefan was accessing? So, is it possible that this is another one of the ways that he was secretly communicating with Maddie to try and keep it off the radar? I don't know, but it's just an interesting thought. My curiosity got the better of me, so I had to do the research. Like I said, it could also be that at Maddie's party, her friends told her about Game Pigeon and went, "Here is a way that we can communicate that your mother won't know about." Because things weren't great between Jen and Maddie. Maddie knew that Jen could access her phone, so maybe she thought, well, if I use Game Pigeon, she won't know it's there, she won't be able to see the chat. Just a few thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on it. Very curious to know what you think. I certainly think there's got to be some significance to it, because otherwise why would they ask her in the first place?
All right, so that's the last time you hear from either one of them until the morning. My understanding is that Stefan comes down and is dealing with your dog. Is there any communication other than perhaps Stefan coming down to use the restroom? Is there any other communication that you have between Stefan and Maddie?
So he's giving her another opportunity here to mention the texts between her and Stefan that occurred. And this is after prompting her with, do you recall him sending you a text saying she's building her nest? So he's well and truly given her a chance here. And yet she's still like, no, she can't remember anything between her and Stefan or her and Maddie. Like I said, this is the last night that her daughter was alive. Apparently, she never went back and looked at any of the texts between her and Stefan. Apparently, she hasn't stopped to think about it at all.
Do you see them? Now, I've said communicate. Do you see them? Do you go up and check on them? Do you see Madeline or Stefan from the point you kick them out at 11 p.m. until you see Stefan at 8 in the morning-ish is what you guess for the dog?
Yeah. No, I didn't. I didn't see them.
Okay. Now, when you go to sleep, do you sleep through the night, or do you wake up and not have consistent good sleep?
I sleep through the night.
Okay. So there wouldn't be any points in time where you get up and you're taking steps or just checking on your phone because you can't go back to sleep? As far as you remember, when you go to sleep, you're out until the dog thing in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
I would love to know what data they have from Jen's phone, because that is such an oddly specific question. Asking her if her phone would have recorded any steps. Specifically asking her in relation to movement of her phone. Things occurring, events occurring with her phone. Certainly, there's something more to the story here. And of course, according to Jen, she slept right through. I do wonder if what he's referring to is the fact that she was on her phone until nearly midnight. Because, she claims that she had to take her meds and get to sleep. And then the data shows that she was actually doing something on her phone and finally put it on the charger around midnight, long after sending Stefan and Maddie to bed, claiming that she needed sleep.
Did you hear or see anything during those hours involving Stefan or Madeline?
I didn't hear or see anything that night.
So the questioning was specifically about from when she went to bed to when she woke up in the morning and Stefan was fiddling around with the dog. he's talking about that entire night, morning, early morning period of time. Not just when Jen went to bed. And she claims, she slept through, or whatever she said there. And then he asks her, did you see or hear anything at that time? Now, like I said, the questioning was referring to from the period of time when she went to bed to the period when she got woken up by Stefan supposedly trying to wrangle the dog. Her answer is, I didn't see or hear anything. And then there's a slight pause, and she says, that night. And the way she says that night sounds to me like fading facts. It certainly sounded like night came out far more softly than the rest of what she said. So she's not saying she didn't see anything at all. She's just saying she didn't see or hear anything that night when she sent them up to bed. She's leaving the morning out from what she's saying here. Did she hear something in the early hours of the morning that she's not going to tell them about? She was very specific, adding that night on the end of what she was saying right there. We know she's manipulative. We know she's actually very good at avoiding giving straight answers. So her adding that night on at the end, when she knows that this interview, she's not supposed to lie, makes me wonder.
All right. What's the first thing you remember when you wake up after having gone to sleep?
I wake up to Stefan trying to put the leash on the dog.
Okay. Now, is this the first time that you've ever woken up to Stefan trying to put a leash on your dog, or is that something that has occurred before in the past?
I'm going to say this is the first time.
Jen is so easy to read. Having gone through all the other interviews, you can tell when she's being honest. You can tell when she's trying to avoid the answer or when she's outright lying. And here, you get a completely different cadence, a completely different tone of voice. She comes out with the answer pretty much straight away. There's a brief pause, but not one of her really long pauses. And she says this louder and in a matter-of-fact tone. This is a normal speech pattern. So I believe that she's telling the truth here. I'm going to say this is the first time with regards to, is this the first time he's ever come in and collected the dog to take it for a walk? Come in to put the lead on the dog? I know some people have said that when she says, I'm going to say, that they think it's her about to lie. And that was my first impression quite a long time ago when I heard her saying that. But I've heard it in other interviews with other people and not just this case. So I'm thinking it's kind of one of those linguistic things that is perhaps used by some people in Florida. And it's nothing more than a filler. I'm going to say this. I'm not 100% certain, but I'm at least trying to be honest here. I'm going to say this, don't hold me to it, but I think this is what the case is. So I think it's someone attempting to be truthful and saying, this is what I believe that I know. Not, I'm going to say this because it's a lie. So I actually think that what she's saying here is that, to the best of her knowledge, this is the first time that it has actually occurred, and I actually think she's being honest.
It's not normal for any of us to put the leash on the dog on the bed, because if he's on top of any, like, bed, couch, anything, he'll pee. He gets really nervous. You have to do it on the floor. So I found it really weird that he did that, but...
All right, so let me ask it a little more broadly. Is this the first time Stefan's ever come into your room while you're sleeping to take the dog out for you in the morning?
I can't recall if he something before.
Okay.
So, of course, now it becomes apparent that what she's so confident about when she's saying, I'm going to say this is the first time, is not about him coming into the room to collect the dog, but that this is the first time he's actually tried to put a lead on the dog while it's on the bed. Because she then goes into this long explanation yet again that she found it odd because if you try and put the lead on the dog, if you don't do it the right way, it's going to pee, and she didn't want it to pee on her bed. All that, story that we've heard before. So the detective basically wants to home in a little bit more. Let me ask you more broadly. Or, I don't think it's the detective, I think it's Will J asking the questions still, isn't it? So he asks her, let me ask you more broadly. Is this the first time that he actually comes into your room to take the dog out in the morning? She doesn't want to answer this question. You get the and then you get a really long pause. Again, clearly it's at the back of her mind that she's supposed to answer truthfully. This is the derivative use interview. So she says, I can't recall if this has happened before. And the last part, it's happened before, is so quiet that once again I had to go back and listen to it again to try and catch exactly what she said. Fading facts, yet again. She claims that she can't recall if it's happened before. So she's quite happy to claim that he's never tried to put the leash on the dog on her bed, because they don't do that, and she's implying that he knows that. But now when they've asked her if he's ever taken the dog out of a morning, suddenly she can't recall if it's ever happened before. There's definitely more to this dog story. Either Jen just completely made it up, because Stefan never mentions it, or Jen does think it's really weird because Stefan's never shown interest in walking the dog, and why stress over walking the dog if your role was to take Maddie to school? Was there any conversation the night before in terms of, can you also walk the dog in the morning? Because she never mentions there having been any conversation of her asking him to walk the dog. So there's definitely more going on here.
Did you find it unusual then? Or what did you think when this is occurring?
When it happened, I think I was more... I found it off, but I was more worried over the dog. I was like, please don't pee on the bed. I don't want to do laundry.
Okay.
So I was more anxious over that.
So he asks her if he found it unusual. And her comment is, I thought it was off, but I was more concerned with the dog. Please don't pee on the bed. I don't want to do. And there's a long pause, and then she says laundry really quietly. So I was more anxious over that, she then adds. Now, I think I've just made a connection here. I think I know why we never heard this story from Stefan and what's going on here in the first place. So, we know that one of the flatmates saw Stefan doing laundry. And she told detectives about that. Stefan would have been aware that she saw him doing laundry. We know that Stefan and Jen had stories that were almost identical. And the question has always been, why was this never mentioned, the dog thing never mentioned by Stefan, but always pushed by Jen? And I'm wondering if perhaps this story was one that they came up with if they were asked about Stefan doing laundry. Maybe the thought was that it was meant to originally be a story of the dog peeing on the bed in Stefan's room, and that's why Stefan did laundry. And Jen has got it into her head, the whole thing of putting the lead on the dog on the bed, forgot how the narrative was meant to go, and had it all occurring in her room when it's meant to have occurred in Stefan's room. And perhaps not actually meant to have been a story that she was overly aware of, or maybe it was meant to be something that she relates as, this is the conversation I had with Stefan, he told me this happened, and that he had to do laundry. Did they have this up their sleeve in case the flatmate said to the detectives, Stefan did laundry and he's never done laundry before? And this was there for an explanation of Stefan doing laundry. Because the way she says this sentence, like, please don't pee on the bed, I don't want to do, you get this pause and laundry is said so quietly. Why does she pause and say laundry so quietly? To me, it screams guilty knowledge. Either she wants to steer away from talking about doing laundry because she knows that Stefan did a load of laundry, or she's suddenly come to the realisation that, hang on, the dog story was meant to be an explanation of Stefan doing laundry, and oops, I got it wrong. Just an interesting thing, just something to think of, because definitely, to me it sounded like she realised she wasn't meant to mention doing laundry. And like I said, it could just be guilty knowledge. She knows Stefan did laundry. She's not meant to know Stefan did laundry. It's not something that detectives are meant to know about. Maybe that's all it is. But she's connected it with the dog story. This could be the explanation for the dog story. It could just be unrelated. But definitely her saying laundry quietly, pausing and saying laundry quietly, says to me that at the very least she knew that Stefan did a load of laundry.
He put the dog on the leash and told me to lay down and go back to sleep. And I said, okay.
So were you not laying down when he tells you to go back and lay down?
No, when he put the leash on the dog, I shot off the bed because I was going to help him. I was like, no, let me do it. And he's like, no, go back to sleep. I'm fine. I got this.
Okay.
I said, okay.
So apparently she's super concerned that the dog might pee on her bed because Stefan's not going to do it right. She doesn't want to do another load of laundry. So she shoots up off her bed to help him and says, let me do it. And he says, no, go back to sleep. I've got this. And she says, I said, okay. So she's gone from one moment being super concerned about him doing it wrong and the dog peeing on the bed to, okay, I'll go back to sleep. I'll let you do this your own way. She's contradicting herself here. Definitely this dog story, whichever way you look at it, it just does not add up. And I've said this so many times. If you were physically up off the bed, wouldn't you go stick your head out the door and say good morning to your daughter? You're up. You're physically up. I mean, it makes no sense. None of this dog story makes any sense to me.
Now, do you go back to sleep, or do you check your phone, or do anything?
I think I go back to sleep.
She thinks she goes back to sleep. She doesn't know. Funny thing is, and we'll listen to this bit tomorrow, she then goes on to talk about hearing someone in the kitchen. Well, given that the whole thing going on with the dog makes me think that was all she was focused on at the time, I'm guessing she didn't mean that she heard someone in the kitchen at the time that Stefan was trying to put the lead on the dog. So she's claiming she went back to sleep, but when did she hear someone in the kitchen then? And the thing that bugs me here is this whole, she's woken with a start because Stefan came into the room. So clearly someone coming into the room woke her up. She's never once questioned the fact that she never saw Maddie come into her room or go through her room to use the bathroom, to brush her teeth, brush her hair, do her makeup, take her oh so very important medications. She's instantaneously awake when Stefan comes into the room to put a lead on the dog. She's not questioning why the dog's in her room in the first place, because we know that the cat sleeps in her room, not the dog. We never hear her question that. The way she tells this story gives the impression that the dog is actually normally in her room. There's so many holes in her story here. Now, we're well over 2 hours here, so I'm going to leave it here and I will come back to it again tomorrow in another video. So, I know there's a lot in this video that I've said in the past, but like I said, it's always good to revisit this based on everything else that we now know, especially based on the jail calls and also from having just gone through the other interviews. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this particular part of this interview and seeing if you have different ideas to me, things that you think maybe make more sense than some of the suggestions I've made. So on that note, again, if you are new to my channel, please subscribe. And of course, please hit the like button and please leave a comment below. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.